I'm sorry, I'm now imagining Elizabeth Schwarzkopf saying he's very good at sex. I taught him everything he knows.
Welcome to Decanonized, an opera podcast where the sacred is subjective. I'm your host, Olivia Giovetti, and every other week I will be joined by a guest to dive into one of the top 100 operas as collected in Henry W. Simon's book, 100 Great Operas and Their Stories. And this week we are taking a look at the first of 6 Richard Strauss operas on this list, Der Rosenkavalier. Der Rosenkavalier tells the story of Octavian, the titular Knight of the Rose, and a young man who has, in the words of Lonely Island, just had sex with the older, but not old, Marschallin, a princess and wife of a field marshal, hence the name. The Marschallin enlists Octavian into delivering a silver rose to Sophie, the fiancée of her cousin Baron Ox, and wouldn't you know it, those two crazy kids fall in love. Joining me for today's episode is guest Ben Miller. Ben is a writer and historian living in Berlin. With Hugh Lemmy, he is the host of Bad Gays, a podcast about evil and complicated queers in history. That is also a book from Verso. And he has also covered opera and literature for the New York Times, the Baffler, and London Review of Books. Ben, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Olivia.
The year is 1911. Roald Amundsen reaches the South Pole. International Women's Day is celebrated for the first time in Europe. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire kills 146 people in New York.
Do you know that there was a long period when Barbra Streisand was trying to direct a musical film about the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire that was going to be called Triangle because it was going to be a love triangle at the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire?
Was it going to be Triangle with an exclamation point in the title?
I certainly hope so.
See, now I'm just thinking, because we're talking about love triangles, that it would be Rosenkav staged in the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire.
With Barbra Streisand as the Marschallin, probably?
We have to stop because if there are any German directors listening to this,
someone's going to do it.
We're just dramaturging this for them at this point.
Someone's going to do it, aren't they?
Speaking of Germans, also in 1911, the Lusitania sinks, and that causes a small issue for one of the Metropolitan Opera's original Rosenkavalier stars, Margarete Arndt-Ober, who sang Octavian, because she was at a party with a few other German singers from the Met, where they played a parody song about the Lusitania. And yeah, didn't go over well once the Met administration heard about it.
Oh.
I think she may have been the first singer to sue the Met and win. After the U.S. entered World War I, they furloughed most of their German singers on the grounds that they weren't doing German rep. And most of their German singers said, yeah, this is because we're German, isn't it? And so Margarete Arndt-Ober sued the Met and won for breach of contract.
Well, I don't know. I think I support anyone who sues the Met.
Musical works in 1911 included Mahler's Das Lied von der Erde, Alexander's Ragtime Band by Irving Berlin, the other ragtime song Naughty, 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 Ethel Smythe's The March of the Women and Stravinsky's Petrushka, and this opera, Der Rosenkavalier. Ben, what is Der Rosenkavalier about?
Der Rosenkavalier is about time, and about nostalgia, and about very fancy lesbians, and it's also about opera, and I think it is the most opera queen of all of the operas, for this and other reasons. It's this very strange mix of comedy and tragedy. It is extremely light in some way in its themes, but those themes are then treated with absolute seriousness. It is full of moments which are completely ridiculous, but then also if you think about it for more than 3 seconds, it's just profoundly, profoundly sad. It's kind of about being a person. in both the best and the worst ways, or at least being a very specific kind of person, right? And if you're a gay guy like me, you're attracted to art about being a very fancy lady for complex historical reasons that we can discuss.
What was your first experience with it?
My first experience with it was what remains maybe my single favorite performance of anything ever, which is actually on YouTube with English subtitles. So if you were listening to this and you are interested in the conversation that we're having, you can go and take a look at this yourself. There is a performance of Der Rosenkavalier from Munich in 1978, conducted by Carlos Kleiber, with Gwyneth Jones as the Feldmarschallin, Brigitte Fassbender, Universal Fave, as Octavian, and Lucia Popp as Sophie, the younger woman. And it's just the most perfect performance of anything that I can think of, even in this very kind of dusty 70s period piece production.
I think that's actually part of the problem I have with this work because, as a queer woman myself, I should really love this piece. And I love the idea of it. And I love the first 5 minutes of it. And then from there, it's very long. And a lot of the productions I have seen of it have been these, Strauss and librettist Hugo von Hofmannsthal wrote this work in the early 1900s, but set it in the 1740s, right around the time that Empress Marie-Thérèse was succeeding her father. There was a big European war that got everybody involved over trying to either fuck with or defend the Habsburgs. And they set it kind of smack dab in the middle of that time. It doesn't sound like music of that era, but it looks like it. And somehow for me, it may just be the first experience I had of seeing it was the old Otto Schenk, I think, production at the Met.
So the one at the Met was not Otto Schenk. The one at the Met was Schmatto Schmenk. The one at the Met was even older. The one at the Met, did you see it with Renee Fleming?
I saw it with
in that stiff white wig.
I saw it with Susan Graham.
Yes, and Renee Fleming.
No, it was Angela Danoka.
But in that stiff,
exactly that
stiff white wig, and in the final trio, she's wearing that stiff nightmare lavender polysatin dress.
I mean, these women are not having sex
in
these outfits.
No one has ever had sex in those outfits.
By the time you get all of that off, it is dawn and you are just exhausted.
That's why they design clothes that way. That was also my first live production of the opera. And actually, it's funny, I didn't see a good production of Rosenkavalier until relatively late in my love for it. So I came to love this piece in bad productions. And then I've now seen one only on film and one also in person, two extremely good productions that take somewhat different approaches to it. And I think it's not an easy piece to update because it is so specifically of the Viennese aristocracy. And so you really have to figure out what you're going to do with the Viennese aristocracy, right? Mm-hmm. It's not something like Salome where you can place it in any kind of decadent situation, or Electra, which could be, as Patrice Chéreau said about Electra, it's about a normal family. That's why that man was the best director of all time. Or, Yennefer can be in any village, right? You can put any village of any time, village dynamics remain the same. This is a piece that is specifically about the Viennese aristocracy. And it's so about the Viennese aristocracy that Strauss and Hofmannsthal actually invent fake Viennese aristocratic traditions in order to sort of fully build out this world, right? So this idea, which I think makes it really interesting because it makes it not just a pure history piece, right? It's instead this exercise in nostalgia as Austria is about to be at the center of another Europe-wide war, and it becomes then this kind of symbol of everything that is lost in sort of pre-bellum, pre-World War I Austria, right? This.
We never deliver silver roses anymore to the people we want to bang.
We don't. We should.
There's a fascinating documentary about, I think it was made, it might be 20 years old now, which is really weird to think of, but I guess, that's in keeping with the theme of time passing. But it's about men who found Ukrainian wives online. It follows them working with this agency, going to Ukraine, meeting these women in person. And there's this one guy who was just clearly getting scammed by this woman, and 100% good for her. I'm on the team of this woman. But he brings her a solid gold rose as part of his wooing of her. And every time I hear the presentation of the rose scene, I just think of this guy.
Do not tell a German director.
Yeah. So Henry Simon in his book says quite some years later, the composer was for the first time conducting a performance of it himself. In the last act, all while conducting, he leaned over to his first fiddle and whispered, "Isn't this awfully long?" "Why, maestro," objected the concertmaster, "you composed it yourself." "I know," said Strauss sadly, "but I never thought I'd have to conduct it."
This is why the solution. So here's my opinion about Rosenkavalier. I think Rosenkavalier should be taken very, very fast and with none of the cuts. And if you take it very fast and with none of the cuts, it feels faster than your average standard cuts Rosenkavalier performance. So a standard performance of this piece takes about 20 minutes of stuff out, mostly out of the first act. Once you hear it with all of that music, but done very quickly, it really does. And I think for me in general, when Strauss is played fast and light, it comes to life in a way that it doesn't when it's played heavy and dull. There is a famous Strauss quote about conducting where he says that all of his operas, including Salome and Electra, which are some of the loudest things ever written for unamplified instruments, should be played like Mendelssohn. And I think he's correct. That like if every individual person is playing with an extreme lightness of touch, like it will be loud enough, don't worry.
And maybe this works. Maybe this kind of fastness works as a solution to it, because in the book, Henry Simon also talks about this being, along with Meistersinger, the greatest German comedy since Mozart. And I feel like if your two greatest comic operas since Mozart are Meistersinger and Rosenkavalier, you may not want to lay a claim to a comic operatic tradition. There again, this is also the region of the world that gave us Werner Herzog. So maybe just having Werner Herzog stage this would be the solution to everything.
You see, is Rosenkavalier a comedy about Octavian, where Octavian and Sophie meet and get married at the end? Or is it, as I would argue, actually a tragedy about the Marschallin? Or if not a tragedy about the Marschallin, because she's very clear to tell us, we have to take everything lightly. And, she's an extremely wealthy woman who will have more lovers, I assure you.
Octavian isn't the first person she stepped out on her husband with.
Oh, no, and will not be the last.
And again, I love that for her.
Oh, I love it for her very much. The Marschallin is one of the great characters in all of opera. And I think if you really love this piece, the reason why you really love this piece is because you really love her. There are several extraordinary things about her. One of them is that she's extremely smart, and she's constantly making intelligent, deep observations, especially about time, that are really shattering. So yeah, you mentioned parts of this piece that everyone loves, and maybe we should just walk through them.
Yeah.
So the piece opens with this orchestral interlude, which everyone always plays too slowly, except for Carlos Kleiber and Vladimir Yurovsky. It climaxes with these whooping horns and
Yeah, those horns are just 100% Octavian having his first partnered orgasm.
Literally, the horns go, wah, 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 wah.
I love that Richard Strauss knows exactly what the female orgasm sounds like.
Yes.
Ally.
Yes. So we have the sounds of birds.
Because it's a Richard Strauss opera.
Because it's a Richard Strauss opera and it's morning.
Do we think that he had a primal fetish?
I can't imagine Richard Strauss's sex life. I just can't. Someone who was capable of writing both Symphonia Domestica and Salome was either the most vanilla or the kinkiest person in all of human history.
I'm really leaning towards the most vanilla.
Me too. So the curtain goes up, birdsong, they're lying in bed, they sing this sort of languorous love duet full of postcoitalisms and the most postcoital harmonies you could possibly imagine.
But very quickly we also see that for Octavian, this is oh my God, I love you, mommy. And
the Marschallin is thanks, dear. Nice job. That was a little fast.
I'm sure she appreciates his enthusiasm.
The field marshal, best part about this opera is the field marshal is neither seen nor heard from. The field marshal is just off hunting. And
And that says volumes about their own sex life and why she probably really loves being the person to deflower all of the highly titled young men in the tri-state area.
Yes. It is during this duet, by the way, that I, when first seeing Der Rosenkavalier with Susan Graham and Renee Fleming, lived through a genuine Harold, They're Lesbians moment in real life, which was the two old Upper West Side types sitting in the row behind me. One leans to the other halfway through and says, "I thought they were lesbians."
Well, I mean, I think this is why this opera is such a hallmark for female queers as well as male. There's this book on travesty, and Terry Castle writes about this. The fact that the body is female, that the voice is a woman's voice, remains inescapable. And the very deftness of the pantomime prompts a kind of lesbian chauvinism. This is a woman we are invited to imagine who is as good as, if not better than, any man. And
Yep.
if you are like anywhere on the Kinsey scale when you were seeing this opera, like you clock it. It is just like a bell going off in your head.
If Octavian was a tenor, we would never play this piece. This would be one of the Strauss operas that no one ever does. So they're in bed, and then Octavian quickly has to hide because the Marschallin's annoying cousin from the country has come to visit and comes sort of busting his way into her bedroom.
Every time he's on stage, he brings chaos with him.
He does. He is an agent of chaos.
Do we think he's actually bi?
That's left very much open to debate, but we'll get there.
I mean, the chaotic bi energy. There's at least the chaotic energy there.
So he shows up, and they have to figure out what the hell to do with Octavian, and so they think, haha, why don't we dress Octavian up as a lady and pretend that Octavian is my chambermaid? So you now have a girl playing a boy playing a girl. And despite the fact that Cousin Ox is here to marry a woman who he is the creepiest and the worst about, he's all about how she is barely legal and very rich, and because she's a commoner, he has arranged to get a huge amount of money from her family because this will elevate her into the aristocracy.
And they're like nouveau riche.
And they're nouveau riche, yes. And actually, it is mentioned at one point that her father has made his money by being an arms dealer, which Robert Carson, the director, did very interesting things with. But despite the fact that he's here to get married, he's also like really hitting on Octavian as chambermaid, which everyone thinks is very funny. And he asks for the Marschallin's help in getting a titled cousin to do this presentation of the rose ritual. Because you're supposed to have a young man who's not yet of marrying age present a rose to your betrothed in Viennese high society. And he's all like, oh, ha, ha, what happens in Vienna stays in Vienna, but also Vienna's scary, but also Vienna's really interesting, but also Vienna's the site of intrigue, la, la, la. So then the Marschallin agrees to this, and then she, as all of us would like to, begins to welcome a series of guests into her room as they come in to, like, do her hair and get her makeup together, and then she sees these...
And this is where the opera loses me.
Extremely annoying orphans who are begging for money in this very annoying way. And then there's this incredibly magical moment when this Italian tenor comes in and sings a song where Strauss says, "You know what, Puccini? I see what you do, and I can do it just as well. And now I did it, now I'm done." It's such a beautiful aria. I love this. It's very silly.
And, you know, I actually love the Robert Carson staging of this because he has Matthew Polenzani as the Italian tenor come out looking exactly like Enrico Caruso because the Carson staging sets it at around the time that Strauss wrote it. So.
Right. So it would have been Caruso. Even better is what Barry Kosky does with this moment when the whole thing is happening in the Marschallin's memory. And so he's thinking, okay, if the Marschallin is a young woman in about 1715 or 1720, then what she has seen is the Lully operas. And so suddenly the entire stage is tinted in gold, and out comes a line of people in full Sun King court regalia, and the whole thing happens in her memory in a series of mirrors, and kind of trips off her musings on the nature of the passing of time, right? That because at some point she does say, like, this was my favorite song from back then, oh, and the person who sang it must be dead now. And it's kind of the beginning of her time musings, which she then after this goes into, where she has this great monologue called Da geht hin, where she's thinking about how, unfortunately it's the way of the world that these young women are married off to these like horrible men. And I remember a woman like that who was fresh out of the convent and about to get married to someone. And where did she go? Octavian comes back and is like, babe, why are you so sad? I love you. And she's like, yes, you love me, but like this is not going to last. And Octavian is like, what are you talking about? And then she has her second great time monologue where she says, time is a funny thing. At first, you can't really see it, but then when you become aware of it, you're aware of nothing else. It's everywhere. It's flowing between us. It's like, like sand in an hourglass. It's crawling over my skin. Sometimes I like to stand up in the middle of the nights and walk around the palace and stop all of the clocks.
Manchmal steh ich auf, mitten in der Nacht, und lass die Uhren alle stehen.
But we have to take it lightly because God punishes people who don't take it lightly. And, we all have to live here on this planet. And Octavian is like, I do not understand what you're talking about. You are making me sad. Why are you speaking to me like a priest? He leaves. She freaks out because she didn't kiss him. And she then calls in the most problematic character in this opera, her child Moorish slave, Muhammad.
There definitely aren't any problematic descriptions of this character in the older texts that I have read on Rosenkavalier.
No. Who Robert Carson turns into a kind of young Ottoman soldier who's in love with her. That's a tack a lot of directors take. Barry Kosky just abandons Mohammed and instead gives us a naked old man playing Cupid, which is perfect. And says, I sent Octavian away, give him the silver rose, and on the silver rose, her job is to float a perfect high D. Having done that, she then does what all grand ladies do after floating a perfect high D, which is gaze at herself in a hand mirror and collapse on a divan.
God forbid a woman have a hobby.
Yes. Also, Act 1 is always a really fun set. Like, you tell a hyperactive gay guy, design a very fancy lady's very fancy bedroom, and no matter what you have, no matter who you've got, no matter what tack they're taking, no matter whether it's very traditional and Otto Schenk and you have this sort of giant confection of pink and green chiffon coming down over the bed, or whether you have Robert Carson, who, as we all know, loves a big bed and this time gave himself the very biggest bed to play with, or Barry Kosky.
I've sat on that bed.
You've sat on that bed? Is it as big as the studio?
Yes. I maybe even bigger.
Okay.
Yeah, I worked with Alina on her social media, and actually the last thing I did before I left that job was shadow her backstage for Rosenkavalier to do like a Met Instagram takeover.
By the way, once you've seen it, you can never unsee it. Alina Garancha in that production is a body double for Judith Butler. You know I'm right.
I'm choosing not to respond to that.
Judith Butler is Octavia. German directors, take this one from here.
Oh, God. What's
The Marshal and Azif Kasovsky Sedgwick.
Oh, God.
Sophie is... No, we're not going to go any... Wendy Brown. So then Act 2 is all about the presentation of the rose. So we open and it is Sophie's big day, and everyone is really excited because it's her big wedding day, and she is the most excited about getting married. She's the most excited about being noble. She's studied her book about all the Viennese noble families. She knows the genealogy of everyone. She knows who's coming to pick her up.
She knows their nicknames.
She knows their nicknames. She knows the gossip about them. She knows everything. She is the best, done all of her homework.
She would have done so well on The Gilded Age.
She would have. And she is so excited, and she is so happy. And then we get this big blast of chords, and then we get very pretty Celeste chords, and Octavian is here to deliver her the rose, and she looks at Octavian, and they fall absolutely madly head over heels in lust with each other.
He is of marrying age.
He is just of marrying age, and they sing this duet, which is the second unbelievably fancy lesbian duet in the opera. If you do take a look at the video of that Kleiber performance I mentioned, and there's an excerpt of just the presentation of the rose, there's a moment in that video when Lucia Pop hits a high D in this duet, and it's a Lucia Pop high D, so it's like a perfect pearl. And Brigitte Fassbender's face just like, I mean, it can't even be acting. She just like twitches in pleasure.
That was, I remember hearing that. There's a Natalie Dessay recording of Strauss arias and duets and the, I think, final trio of Rosenkavalier. And she records that duet with Angelika Kirchschlager, I think. And it's not just that it's that high D, but it's just the way that he brings it up there and it just lingers there.
Yeah. It's like
and
time
when you
stops.
hear the right singer do it, that's exactly it. Time stops. You are just suspended in this incredible moment of everything happening all at once.
Yes.
And it's so delicate and it's so perfect.
And then guess what crashes into the delicate perfection? Baron fucking Ox. And Sophie takes one look at him and is like, what? You want me to what? Him? That one? The one who's like drunk and all of his servants are drunk and they're like wandering around the house like smashing things and he's like sexually harassing me and like trying to get me to have sex with him before the wedding and like openly talking about how he's purchasing me from my father, or even my father is paying him to take me. Like,
and in most stagings, he's old enough to be my father.
Or older. Like, And
you gotta love the Robert Carson production uses a somewhat youngish looking Ox, but it is Günter Greusbeck, who, as we all learned after 2020, is a bit of an anti-vaxxer COVID conspiracy theorist. And you're like, not even wondering. I'm just completely sure that Baron Ox would have been an anti-vaxxer as well.
Baron Ox is MAGA. Barry also used a younger Ox. I kind of like that decision because it makes it less... you have to make it, instead of it being like, oh, he's old, ha ha ha, it's like, oh no, he's a horrible person. Because he is. Baron Ox is a horrible person.
Yeah. I don't really care about the age thing. That's that's beside the point.
And by the way, while Baron Ox is doing all of this, he's also hired these gossip mongers to try to get a note to the Marschallin's hot maid to try to set up some kind of a thing with her. And so Octavian runs over to Sophie and he's like, okay. And they sing another duet about how he's going to rescue her. And then the plan is hatched that they're going to have Octavian dress as the maid again, set up some kind of assignation, and then ... question mark. I don't think that there's exactly a plan for how this is going to come to its conclusion, but they figure like at least we can,
yada yada yada.
We'll entrap him somehow. And then Baron Ox,
works.
And it works. So then Baron Ox gets the note and is like, ha ha ha. Vienna is such a funny place. Then Act 3 dawns, Now, if you
By
think...
the way, Ben, I just want to say we are describing this in fairly detail. This second act, which is the shortest act, is still almost an hour long.
Yes.
It's too much. It is too much opera.
Is there such a thing as too much opera?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, here's what I'll tell you don't want. If you think, because Act 3 is the one that's really long, so I'll lay out Act 3 and then I'll make this point. So in Act 3 begins with the assignation, which is at this...
Bordello.
Inn. It's an inn. It's a bordello. It's an inn. Anyway, so it's a place where, let me try to phrase like my grandmother, where perhaps ladies of the evening, ladies who might be of ill repute, can get no questions asked rooms to have dinner in, because what they're going to do is have dinner. So Baron shows up, Octavian shows up. If you think that Rosenkavalier is too long, this series of interactions at the inn, which goes on for, depending on who's conducting and whether or not there are any cuts, somewhere between 45 and 60 minutes, this is the part where it really gets tiresome. If you think Rosenkavalier is too long, I do not recommend that you go see the performance that I saw in February of 2020, which was conducted by an actively dying Zubin Mehta and had no cuts at all. And this was a Rosenkavalier that had 4 hours and 57 minutes of music. Never mind the intermissions.
So that's how you spent your first lockdown.
We were all there the whole time. So we're at the inn, and so then at some point, the police come and investigate what's going on. Like, the inn gets raided by the cops, and no one knows what's going to happen in this sort of chaos. Oh, they've gotten all these people to pretend to be Baron Ochs's illegitimate children to, like, jump out and scare Sophie's father. They're going to have Sophie's father come and see what's up.
One of the Marshallins' legitimate maids comes in and says that she is his estranged wife.
Right.
And all of their children come out. And, this is the other thing. It's a long enough opera as is, and I don't need a child's chorus jump scare in the last act.
No, but you already had the children's chorus playing the annoying orphans in Act 1, so once you've used them, it's Chekhov's children's chorus. And then...
Those poor kids don't get to go home until like 1 a.m.
Just as everything is sort of heating up to a climax, we get a smash, like, fully cinematic moment where everything just turns into the Marshallins' music, and she gets to wear another great dress and make another grand entrance, and solves everyone's problems for them. So she says to her cousin Ox, look, you've embarrassed yourself quite enough. You are not going to marry this girl. You're going to go back home. But because she is who she is, she also says to the police chief who's there, you'll, like, let him off. He's fine. He's with me. She then proposes to Sophie's father that, hey, if you really want your daughter to marry a nobleman, why not?
This guy. He's very good at sex.
I know this because reasons.
Taught him everything he knows.
Octavian. I'm sorry, I'm now imagining Elizabeth Schwarzkopf saying, he's very good at sex. I taught him everything he knows. And Sophie's father is, like, overwhelmed because Sophie's father has decided basically, like, oh my God, this is going to be, like, the great scandal of the day. My daughter was going to marry this guy who was a bigamist and there was a scandal. And she's like, no, marry her. Sophie's also there, by the way, for some reason. She's, like, arrived with her father. And then the Marshallin throws in the great deal that Sophie's father will get to ride home to his villa in her fancy carriage, which is a big deal. And so everyone is happy, except the Marshallin. And then we get the other moment from this piece that everyone loves, which is that Octavian, the Marshallin, and Sophie sing a trio, where Octavian is kind of marveling at the fact that the Marshallin has let him go. Sophie is realizing what's happening for the first time and talking about how sort of noble this grand woman is, who's exactly the sort of woman she would like to be. And the Marshallin is singing about how you can't win them all. And it ends with the Marshallin saying he'll be as happy as people are capable of being, but who even really knows what happiness is? Then we get another beautiful duet between Octavian and Sophie, who are very young and very in love and very stupid and will probably get divorced in 5 years. And then the Marschallin picks her next affair partner, who is Sophie's father. I mean, that's not explicitly stated, but...
Why not? He's there.
Or the police chief. It kind of goes either way.
She has a lot of days to fill.
Yeah, so the Marshallin is doing some flirting on the way out, and I think it's the police chief who says to her, looking at Octavia and Sophie, who are like making out in the corner, where young people always like that. And the Marshallin's exit line is a descending seventh. Yeah, yeah. Yes, yes.
She gets her yayas.
She gets her yayas. And that's it. And 4.5 to 5.5 hours later, we have successfully had both a lot and not a lot of plot.
Hofmannsthal comes up with this scenario. He'd worked with Strauss before on Electra and wanted to do another work. And he came up with this entirely original scenario based on reading a lot of Moliere and Beaumarchais, the original Figaro plays. Comes up with this idea. Strauss is in. And at first, he envisioned it as each act, because what we're really talking about here is 3 acts, and they're not even 3 acts with different scenes. We're talking about 3 scenes. One in the Marschallin's palace, one in Sophie's father's house, and one in the inn.
Yes, and it's 2 days. It's fully like Thursday and then Friday.
I mean, this is like, getting into the light scale of like that Samstag aus Licht and Freitag aus Licht. But I think Hofmannsthal originally saw it as each act being about 45 minutes. And then Strauss is the one coming back to him in all of these letters being like, I need a little more here. I need a little more there. I need a little more here. And it's almost like Hofmannsthal just didn't want, like reading these back and forth letters. There's one where Strauss writes to him and says, well, the second act isn't up to what I expect of you or to what you're capable of. Compared with the rest, I find it a little unimaginative and colorless, and I can't help feeling that your taste and talent could produce something much more witty and polished here. And rather than being like, Richard, we really need to hit 2 beats here, and that's it for this act. This is a transition act, basically. Like, once we get past the love duet, Hofmannsthal writes, you will not seriously believe that I would leave you in the lurch at such a juncture that I might create difficulties. It's like, dude, fucking grow a pair. I think that this is just as much about Strauss and to a degree maybe even Hofmannsthal's inability to let go as it is the Marschallin's inability at the beginning, at least, to let go.
So let me give you an answer to that charge that I think is maybe the only possible artistic justification for why Strauss was wanting more and more and more of this. Mm-hmm. And that is that this is a piece which, no less than Salome, but in sort of a quieter way, is taking us to the absolute limits of functional harmony. Like, this is a piece where if you can't take standard tonal functional Western harmony any further than this. Like, further it will not go. And to explore all of these different kind of colors and harmonic patterns is why it is taking as long as it does. And so I would say, in terms of text and plot, like, there is sort of too much text for the amount of plot. There are also a lot of notes. I don't think there are too many notes. I think there's just enough notes, and I think you need all of the notes. And that's why I say when it's uncut, if it's not done too slowly, like that nightmarish Zubimeta performance I heard of it, it actually feels shorter than if it has the standard cuts, because you really do get the kind of evolution and development of all of these harmonies and these themes, and it's just a really, really ravishing score. And not just in its kind of famous moments, but really across kind of all of it. Yeah. And then the too longness of it is also, I think, one of the reasons why this is, I would say, the ultimate opera queen's opera. Opera queenness is all about too much, right? It gives you the chance to talk about 3 sopranos, which are every opera queen's favorite topic. It really requires great vocal performances, and often brings them out. Like, there are many great performances of it, but this is a piece that, like, there are some pieces that I would go just see a kind of random performance of, and this is not one of them. This is something that I would be very kind of picky about what I wanted to go see. It's also a piece that, I mean, there's literally this moment where kind of the magic of opera is what sends the Marschallin off on her journey of talking about time and nostalgia in the first act.
I mean, this is basically Marriage of Figaro fanfic.
It is Marriage of Figaro fanfic, yes.
Which I'm not mad about. I'm super okay
It's Marriage
with
of
this.
Figaro fanfic with no Figaro.
The Marschallin, I know that when we're talking about something set in 1740, age is a different bracket compared to 1911 compared to 2025. Obviously, life expectancies go longer. We now have antibiotics, which are fantastic.
Yeah, we also have retinol and
But the Marschallin
skincare technology. And,
oh, come on. The Marschallin was getting all of that. The Marschallin was getting, like, top-of-the-line mud baths and...
arsenic? Like, there were moments in the 18th century when fancy women in Europe used arsenic for their skin, so...
Empress Sisi would have raw meat placed on her skin to help with keeping its youthful glow and tautness. I think that was part of Sisi's beauty routine.
That production. I want the Marschallin putting slices of
ox.
Yes.
Like, let's just make this completely eat the rich full circle.
Yes.
A lot of productions I've seen, though, you do get these sopranos towards the end of their career or in the late stage of their career singing it. And it's always, to me, like that scene in Arrested Development where no one in the family can accurately make a chicken sound. It's like no one who has ever staged this opera knows what a 32-year-old woman looks like.
Right. She's supposed to be 32, and in most productions, she's 32 going on 70. One thing that's interesting is that the role was premiered by Margareta Sims, who also premiered the part of Chrysothemis in Electra, the kind of younger of the two sisters, the lighter-voiced, the higher-voiced of the two sisters, but still a very dramatic role or a sort of Jugendlich-dramatisch role. And then Zerbinetta in Ariadne of Naxos, which is a coloratura part, which is usually now cast by with someone who would sing as Sophie. And so what we've learned here is, first of all, that singers used to be able to sing more different kinds of things because vocal training was better. And second, that the part of the Marschallin should be played by someone who has a lot of lightness and flexibility in her voice, which you hear in, I mean, the role doesn't call for coloratura per se, but there's a lot of very delicate material in it that certainly should be sung and not brayed.
And like Ox, it is just more interesting when the whole joke isn't, oh, she's too old for you.
Right. It is.
Otherwise, you get into like Mary Kay Letourneau territory really quickly with her and Octavian, because Octavian is like 17.
Now that is a German production of this that I need to see. Like
May, December.
Der Rosenkavalier meets May, December, where Sophie is Natalie Portman and...
And Julianne, I would see Julianne Moore as the Marschallin.
Oh, actually, that is genuinely very good casting.
Either that or Cate Blanchett.
One of the great Marschallai of all time is Eleanor Stieber, and she recorded it actually for TV, but we've lost the kinescopes. We only have the recording at the Met in 1951 when she wasn't. I mean, she was a little older than 32, but she was at the beginning of her career. Eleanor Stieber singing anything is literal perfection. Eleanor Stieber singing the 4 last songs is the best that they've ever been sung. She's just wonderful as the Marschallin, and again, sounds like she's in her 30s. Marlies Peterson sings it beautifully for Barry Kosky. She's definitely not in her 30s when she does it, but both sings and acts it wonderfully. Gwyneth Jones in that production that I mentioned, also like not in the beginning of her career, but in the middle of her career, not a kind of aging person at all.
I do want to bring in a quote from another Marschallin because this keeps me up at night. Kiri Takanawa.
The world's highest paid church soprano?
She calls the opening scene, the first 5 minutes of the opera, the most awkward of any opera, and is on the record in a book as saying, once you get past those first few minutes when you are in bed with another woman, you can get on with the role.
And that's why Kiri Takanawa was not good at this part.
Babe.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? She recorded that with Anna-Sophie von Otter. Can you imagine being in bed with any era of Anna-Sophie von Otter, but like especially adorable baby Swedish Anna-Sophie von Otter, and thinking, ew?
No, and I am, as we've established in everything that I've said up until now, the world's gayest man. So, I'm going to go ahead and say the king of Octavians is the one, the only Miss Brigitte Fassbender.
There's an entire chapter on Travesti just dedicated to Fassbender and mostly just Fassbender as Octavian.
And there are reasons for this. Once again,
1,000,000%.
Once again, take a look at the video of Brigitte Fassbender singing The Presentation of the Rose with Lucia Pop, and you will feel some lesbian feelings. Very excellent also, and I guess in some ways kind of our generation's Brigitte Fassbender. Emily D'Angelo just sung it at the Wiener Staatsoper in a production so ugly and so old that we were actually sending each other screenshots of it last week.
Does it just come with its own sepia tone?
It apparently does. No, literally, it's the same production that was filmed in 1978, right, with Kleiber. And it was replaced in Munich, but it was not replaced in Vienna. It's a 1968 production, I believe. And I just thought that the colors were because it was, like, the film was old, like old TV film. And no, it just is that color.
They didn't even shoot on film.
No, it just is that color. It's really something. People listening who like this opera might be surprised that I didn't mention Elisabeth Schwarzkopf as one of my favorite Marschallins. She is a famous Marschallin, but I didn't mention her because she's a Nazi and she's bad at singing. So there's that.
How do you square that with Richard Strauss's?
So Elisabeth Schwarzkopf was far more of a Nazi than Richard Strauss ever was. Elisabeth Schwarzkopf joined the party actively on several occasions and actually made a bunch of propaganda movies for Goebbels and appears to have really believed in it, whereas Strauss's complicity was more reluctant.
And I think this goes back to the discussion we were having of whether or not he's the most vanilla or the most kinkiest guy. And I think he is just, I think he's kind of the Baron Ox, where he's just this country bumpkin who doesn't really think. He writes very, very good music. He obviously thinks about that, but outside of it, he, reading a lot of his letters, if you told me he never cracked open a newspaper during the entirety of the Third Reich unless there was a review of a production of his, I would believe that.
Yes. Whereas Elisabeth Schwarzkopf enthusiastically joined the Nazi Party on multiple occasions.
As did Herbert von Karajan.
Yes. Another one. Who doesn't he conduct the famous Rosenkavalier from Salzburg that she's in?
He does, yes.
Oh, great. It's an all-Nazi affair.
Why do you have to join it more than once? This is the thing. It's kind of like that scene in Succession where he's like, have you ever read Mein Kampf? And the guy says it a couple times. It's like, was there an Easter egg in it the first time you missed? I very much like Alina Garanch's Octavian.
Alina Garanch's Octavian is wonderful, and as mentioned, she looks exactly like Judith Butler. I don't mean that she looks like a person with short hair. I mean she looks like Judith Butler.
Yes, especially in that opening scene again in the Carson production.
If you put Judith Butler in a blonde wig and a gown, she would look like Alina Garancha. And now I want to see Judith Butler in Alina Garancha's Metropolitan Opera Samson and Delilah costumes. What were they thinking with that production?
They were thinking of Judith Butler, clearly.
Yes. Certainly not of Edward Said. But
yeah, who are your favorite Mohammeds?
My favorite Mohammed is Barry Kosky casting a 85-year-old naked white man to play him. To just play him as Father Time. Who, by the way, the last scene of the opera is like an interesting place to compare different productions because Muhammad is sent back in from the carriage to pick up the Marschallin's handkerchief, which he's dropped, and he runs in, sees the handkerchief, and picks it up and kind of runs off stage with it. And you can do a lot of things with that. In the Otto Schenk production from the 1970s, it is, by the way, a young actor of color playing Muhammad. There is not blackface in that production, just so you know.
The bar is in hell.
The bar is in hell. If you want to see blackface, just go to Verona now.
The Cambridge Opera Guide to Rosenkavalier, which was published in 1985, refers to him as the charming Negro slave. 85.
Yeah, just leave that one there. The Robert Carson production, and this is like a great moment at the end.
I loved this moment.
Muhammad, as we've mentioned, is this kind of Ottoman soldier, and Muhammad comes stumbling in drunk, and then all of a sudden World War I happens, and like an entire stage full of soldier extras die, which of course is what happens at the end of the piece.
And Octavian is probably going
to
die.
Yeah. And it's shocking. And then the Barry Kosky production ends with Father Time going over to the stage-sized grandfather clock, opens the front of it, takes the clock hands out, and breaks them. which is also perfect.
My ideal staging for this would be just to have Edward Said as Muhammad, as sort of, because he was also an opera critic. And
Yes.
so here you have just him being the sort of scribe that is relaying all of this back to us in the end.
If you want to see, let's
And then we also
telephone-
have the Judith Butler Octavian in there as well.
Yes.
We just get all of the heavy hitters from the 20th century.
If you want to see the real, let's call Edward Said production, this interminable thing that Zubin Mehta conducted, they just had Muhammad be like in love with her. Because isn't it really funny when like Turkish guys are in love with white women? Ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha. Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha. That was 2020.
Amazing.
Now, Great Sophies, also Eleanor Stieber. There's an even earlier recording. Oh, and I've left someone out of my discussion of this piece. She wasn't the originator of this role, but she was the woman who taught it to Eleanor Stieber, the great, great soprano Lotte Lehmann, who recorded the piece in not the world's greatest sound, but if you're the kind of person who can deal with not great sound, Lotte Lehmann singing the Marschallin is just it. Like, that's just what it is. And then there's a film of her giving a master class in the 1960s, I believe, where she does the monologue an octave down. She's marking it, but you see how she did it, and you just have to see that. Like, if you're one of these people who thinks that operatic acting was invented in the 90s, no, it wasn't.
Da geht hin, der aufgeblasene, schlechte Kerl. Und kriegt das hübsche junge Ding und einen Winkel Geld dazu.
I'm glad you brought that up because when we're talking about Octavians, again, Margarete Arndt Ober was the original Octavian in New York at the Met when the opera premiered there. Musical America ran this fawning cover story on how she was getting fan letters on the art of making love and advice requests because that is how believable she was as Octavian in 1912, 1913.
I love this.
Caruso called her, I think, the she-devil from hell.
Love.
Rosenkavalier, unlike a lot of operas, was a massive, resounding success on its premiere. So much so that even before the opera premiered in Germany, New York press was keeping an ear out for what it was going to be. And there's actually a review that's not a review. Strauss played 2 scenes from it in 1910, so a year before it premiered, he kind of workshopped 2 scenes at a private evening of music. And in a 1910 article for the New York Times, August Spanath was one of the guests at that, and he relayed this to the New York Times, if I can ask you to read this quote.
It can easily be imagined with what attention the French and German guests listened, but the longer they listened, the longer their ears became. Was that really our Richard Strauss? Is the sensation of the new opera to consist in this? That it is no opera at all, but an operetta? Does he, wearied for a while of the perverse and horrible, now wish to enter into competition with Monsieur Lehar and Fall? People were astonished as they listened to this waltz entirely without distinction. Some thought that from these 2 scenes no conclusion as to the whole could be reached, but this is only evasion, for it cannot be supposed that the single scenes differ so entirely from the rest.
They lost their shit.
Yes.
And so much of it is so crowded around the fact that he's writing waltzes that are completely anachronistic to the time period, but are completely appropriate to this fin de siècle Vienna.
Yes, it's a very waltzy score. That's something we didn't really get to in the piece. Like
The waltzes are waltzing.
A lot of it is in 3. Even that final trio is in 3.
You mentioned Puccini before with the Italian tenor's aria. Puccini then wrote La Rondine basically as a massive subtweet of Rosenkavalier.
Huh. Really?
Yeah, that's where he's also trying to work a lot of waltzes into it. There's this part in Act 1 of Rondine where Prunier is talking to Magda, and he makes a reference to these femme fatale of ages past, and he mentions Salome, and you hear the oboe go, da-na-na-na-na-na.
Johanna.
There were some critical reviews of it, even amid all of the raves. In 1924, Cecil Gray wrote, "All we find is a worn-out, dissipated demi-mondaine with a powdered face, rouged lips, false hair, and a hideous leer. Strauss's muse has lost her chastity." One of the best criticisms that I have read on Rosenkavalier, and I don't fully agree with it, but it's one of the best argued, is in Joseph Kerman's book, Opera as Drama. And he calls the scene of the presentation of the Rose, he says, it has all the solidity of a $1.50 Valentine. And when the young lovers come together at the end of the opera, all Strauss can produce is a sort of feeble folk song.
Okay, but that's the point. That's the point. Like, the point is that they're young and stupid and that they're not going to stay together. Like, that's the point. That's what it's about, Joseph. Also, you write a better tune than the final duet between Octavian and Sophie.
I will say one of my favorite parts of this paragraph is when he says, "Was it for this minimal level of consciousness that we had to suffer the Marschallin self-pity and the sacrifice of ox? For this, the silver rose and the white suit, the 3 noble orphans, and 4 finicky hours of leitmotifs, modulations, and program musical wit."
Yeah, but that's what I want. I wanted all of that. That was the point. The point was that. The point was that. The point was not the conclusion. There's no conclusion. It's not a story. It's not a comedy. That's the problem. It's not a comedy about Octavian and Sophie. It is like a nostalgia piece about the Marschallin remembering.
Richard Strauss is really that guy at a panel who says, "I have a question." Well, it's more of a comment than a question. Well, it's more of an observation than a comment. And he then just goes off for like 40 minutes.
Yes, and then the I think it was the next opera that Strauss and Hofmannsthal wrote. They said, we're going to do something that makes Rosenkavalier look short, and they wrote Frauen Schatten. But that's a topic for another day.
This is an opera that is clearly about Strauss without making him a character in it, unless he sees himself as the Marschallin, which maybe is correct. You get a huge sense of who this guy is, and he is someone who is very much a romanticizer of the past, wishes that he could live in that to a degree. And I find that very revealing about him, especially in contrast to Salome and Electra. If you're hearing both of them, they are very different operas.
Electra is also largely waltzes. They're just waltzes for satanic elephants, but, you know.
Well, that's my favorite kind of waltz. Look, if you don't have an opera with an axe, why do you have an opera at all? Okay, I am asking this question, and it seems fairly obvious to ask it after this conversation, but does this opera belong on a list of the 100 greatest operas, Ben?
I would say it absolutely does, but I also don't know that I think that there should be a list of the 100 greatest operas in general, but that's kind of the point of this whole project, isn't it?
Indeed it is. Ben, where can people find you online?
So, you can find me at on Blue Sky and on Instagram at Ben Writes Things, and you can find me also at benwritesthings.com, and if you love the sound of my voice and want to hear me talk in a more structured way, usually about evil and complicated queer people in history, Bad Gaze is a podcast that is available wherever this podcast is being listened to.
Inshallah. Ben, thank you so much for joining us.
Olivia, thank you so much for having me. It's been a delight.